All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are conducting this morning's long-range financial planning meeting at on January 14th, not June, at 8 o'clock in the morning via the provisions of remote meeting, um, uh, which is in effect until the end of March per the order signed by Governor Maura Healey. So. With that, I just want to make sure that we take a quick roll call of all the members, the voting members who are in attendance. So if you could do that, Laura, that'd be great.
Sure. Ellen,
Here.
May is not here yet. Melissa,
Here.
Nancy Hyde,
Here.
Nancy James,
Here.
Paul Tucheri. I can see Paul, he's here.
He is.
Okay.
Paul, can you just say here? He's not on mute,
No.
but we're not hearing him.
Isn't here yet. Phil
Here.
and Rob.
Okay, here. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I think this morning's meeting will be relatively brief, but I'm going to start with some updates on where we are in this year's budget process. And I'm going to do so by encouraging you to watch a few meetings that have either happened or about to happen or are upcoming. Last Monday, January 6th, Stephanie provided a budget update to the select board, and we had some discussion around that. Tonight, we will be going in front of FinCom to begin the review of the warrant articles for the upcoming town meeting. And then next Wednesday, we have another select board meeting, and that's a Wednesday because of the Monday holiday. And while this body, we're not convened to talk about the immediate budget cycles, it's evident from the very name of the committee, we focus on the long term. I want to make sure that people understand some of the structural issues we face that should inform the type of long-term problem solving that we engage in together. So like you'll hear Stephanie talk about in the January 6th meeting, the fixed cost portion of the budget, which has risen significantly. There are things that are outside of the town's control, pension assessment being one, healthcare costs being another, special ed that, Tim can talk to as well. Those are things that we are required to fund, and we don't have direct control over those increases. Those things put an enormous pressure on the operating budget. If I just give you sort of a round numbers example, right? We use $100 million as the town's budget, and we know that we can go up by Prop 2.5, that 2.5%, plus let's call it 0.5% for new growth to be conservative and fiscally responsible. So on a $100 million budget, that's $3 million bucks. Well, the fixed cost portion of the budget accounts for roughly 20%. Let's call that $20 million. And it's currently rising by almost 10%. So if you do the math, we have 3% or $3 million to allocate across continuing to deliver town services. But if that fixed cost, 20%, is going up by 10%, that's $2 million bucks. So that's two of the three right there off the table going to fixed costs. The rest of it is what has to go to, paying the contractual obligations of, collective bargaining, because the vast majority of the services we provide are people driven. And so I just want to highlight that as one of the ongoing issues that we face, and quite frankly, every municipality in this Commonwealth faces. I mean, this is not unique to Westwood by any stretch, but these are things that are outside of our control, and they do put significant pressure on it. So it's why we right now are engaged in this conversation around how do we improve our revenue situation? And we're talking about, this transfer tax, transfer fee, if you will, on real estate to potentially create additional revenue streams for what I'll call long-term infrastructure investments, predominantly buildings, schools, municipal buildings, public safety buildings, that type of thing. And so I think we have some updates from folks. But before we get into those, are there any questions regarding what I've just covered in terms of where we are in the process and how I sort of frame that up to inform this group? Okay, seeing none. I will ask, there are a couple of folks who have some updates for us based on the work streams that we laid out on this. Actually, before I go to that, a couple of other things that you should pay attention to as you hear some of the things that are presented at FinCom and Ellen maybe can talk to some of the things from the planning board perspective. But as I talk about, the need for revenue, one of the other things that is incredibly important is the need for additional commercial growth, because the commercial growth, as you've seen the select board do in the past, and we do it every year, is we approve a tax shift, which puts some of the burden, transfers some of the burden over to commercial properties from residential. And that's it's the only relief valve that we have for residential homeowners. We either have to grow commercial significantly or we have this transfer that we do where we shift the burden as part of the annual budget planning process, this tax shift factor that we approve. So one of the things that I think you'll hear when we are before the FinCom tonight, and ultimately I don't want to steal any thunder, is there is a zoning bylaw that's being proposed regarding a piece of property, which is the Meditech property over off of B Street, to help expand the use. That is one of our most valuable commercial, it may be the most valuable commercial property that we have in town. And we're looking to add hotel as an approved use for that property, should that ever change hands. And so we want to make sure that we get highest, best use value out of commercial properties. And by adding that as an overlay, it will help ensure that that stays on the commercial rolls. Because if that were to ever roll into residential, that would be a big hit. And currently, commercial accounts for, Steph, keep me honest here, just under 12% of the overall assessed values in town. Does that sound right?
It sounds right. I'd have to look it up, but it sounds right.
Okay, so it would be incumbent upon us to make sure that that continues to be a commercial property, adding to the commercial tax rolls, as opposed to having that ever move off and into the residential side of the equation. So with that, as we talk about the project that we are all engaged in, as was asked by the select board, Nancy, I believe you have an update for us on if we had a transfer fee on real estate, what that would have looked like in terms of building a potential source of funding for debt service on capital projects, major capital projects. So do you have information that you'd like to share there?
Yeah, so Stephanie and Cheryl, our new assessor, put together some information for me, and a caveat up front. I realized as I looked at the historical data of residential sales going back to 2014, the spreadsheet that I worked from, and I had talked to you about this briefly, Rob, I see that it doesn't have sales of less than $1 million. So anything I say would only be amplified by those sales. And I'll just ask Stephanie, does that sound right to you, that that's what I was given?
The spreadsheet that we worked on,
Yeah,
it's sort of a history of sales, that's correct, and then different percentages.
right, but no
No.
sales under $1 million?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, so again, my caveat is what I'm about to say would only be larger if we included any sales that occurred that was under the $1 million amount.
Well, because I would believe there's probably a reasonable percentage of the sales that have been under $1 million over the last decade.
Yeah, especially in the earlier part of those
Yeah.
last 10 years.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out, I was looking at it because we're dealing with, over those 10 years, 1,000 sales. I mean, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet, not quite, 800 sales. So it's 800 plus. Anyway, what I can tell you for what I have in front of me is over the almost 11 years, we've had close to $1.2 billion of sales. Again, $1 million or more in value, so we'll be closer to, let's say, 1.3 billion of sales over that time. And the analysis that we have is anywhere from, if we had a transfer fee of 0.5% up to 2%. And so for every 0.5%, it would have generated a transfer fee total of $5.9 million. Again, if we included sales under $1 million, that would only be bigger. So let's just round that for today's discussion to $6 million at 0.5%. So at 2% over that same period of time, $24 million. That would have been revenue generated.
And just sort of straight lining the math, that's roughly a 10-year period. So it would be sort of six, math doesn't work like this, but it would be roughly, 600,000 a year that you would be adding to, that over time would grow.
If it was all smooth,
Yeah,
that would be
right.
the case.
Right.
And so just observations that I want to share. Things changed a lot after 2019 with COVID, and we all know that from firsthand experience, where a lot of people sold their houses at high values. So let me give you a comparison. In 2019, we had over $80 million of total sales. In 2021, we had over $200 million of sales. Now, 2021 was the high point. Since then, it's come down to 2022 at 180 million. 2023 was 125 million. And 2024, we were surpassing 150 million. So somewhat inconsistent with 2021 being a high watermark. So
Yeah,
you
it
can take
makes
that
sense
for what it is. That's
that
not
makes-
likely to be repeated every year.
Yeah, it makes sense that some of the slowdown that occurred after that, though, is probably also driven by the higher interest rates, making it harder to, for people to buy in and things like
A
that.
lot of factors. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of factors. But it would seem that going into 2021, there was a lot driven by capturing value and people
Yep.
making different decisions on a timeline than maybe they would have. So there was a lot of activity.
Yep.
We continue to be a desirable town, and we see that through the Board of Assessors, where values remain strong. We aren't seeing the rate of growth this past year that
Yeah.
we had in prior years, and by that I mean the rate of growth in assessed values. So
Stephanie,
that's
do you
just
think-
general information.
Yeah, Steph, do you think you could have the data set refreshed to reflect all sales? I don't want to draw an artificial line at the $1 million. I'd like to actually know what the total
Yeah,
would have
no,
been.
it was just a threshold that we had talked about a couple of months ago when we put this together. But
Yeah.
I can definitely have Cheryl pull data for everything. And I
Great.
just, one quick note too, the numbers Nancy gave, which were great. For example, the 2% at the 24 million, that's for if it was every dollar, if it was on every dollar of the sale. A lot of communities do a threshold of $1 million. That's sort of why we started there. And it's on 2% on every dollar over $1 million.
Yeah. So I think, for future, a revised presentation of that number, I'd like to understand what it looks like if you were putting the transfer fee on the full value and or every dollar over. I'd like to see the bifurcation on that.
Yeah, I do have that in that data that was sent. That's on
Okay.
there, both calculations.
The other thing that I think I would like you to be able to highlight for folks is when we're talking about debt service, right? So this year's debt service budget that includes the Pine Hill is roughly 2.5 million. Do I have that memory?
Yeah, I think it's about 2.6.
Yeah. All right. And so for every um dollar of, that we would be able to raise through something like this, um, that debt service reflects about what in terms of, the size of the projects that it funds, right? So, um, I know that varies based on some of the interest rates that we go out and get on the bonds, or the notes on the bonds. Um, so I just want to, be able to say, okay, if we were able to realize um, a fund that builds over time with something like this, the significance that what that would provide for in terms of capital infrastructure generally. I'm not, looking to hold anybody to a number, but a ratio of, if my memory serves, it was like for every 100,000, it was like a 10 to 1 ratio. Is that do I have that? Okay. Okay. Paul, I see you have a question.
Yes, so I know we've talked about this before, but if you could refresh my memory on which towns are doing this. And also just to clarify that the seller is the one paying this, not the buyer, correct?
No, we would have it be on the buyer.
Oh, okay, so it's on the buyer.
That's the,
So
yeah.
the buyer pays it, and which other towns are doing this? I just think, for some reason, I thought it was the seller. I thought and I just can only think about people trying to buy first homes. And I think maybe this is why we said $1 million, because it seems with interest rates the way they are, and no real forecast that they'd go down, I do worry about Westwood becoming unattainable for people. And so I think that's why when we talked about it, to Stephanie's point, it was $1 million was what we said, the threshold to look at. But I'd like to know what other towns are,
So I think
which-
that's part, I know we have a list of towns that have done it. I know one of the things that Paul Tesseri is going to be digging into at a future meeting is, of the towns that have implemented this type of transfer fee, what has been the experience with respect to home prices versus surrounding communities that have not? I just want to make sure that we have a sense of, did it affect the appreciation of home values in any way, shape, or form? So
yeah,
that's,
I'm not, I get that. What I'm saying is, do we know, can you tell me which towns do this? Do we know that now? I'm just curious. And
yeah,
then, I'd love to know the rest of it. Does it affect the home value? Again, I'm more worried about keeping, I mean, I know this might sound like an oxymoron, but keeping Westwood affordable, right? I know it's not necessarily an affordable town, but I really do worry about saddling new buyers with, a big nut before they get here, making sure we're clear about that. So it's not small potatoes when you.
no, and I think that's, we're in the preliminary stages. I don't think we are saying that, we would, we've like landed on anything by any stretch. I think
Of course not. No, I
know,
get it, that
'cause
we live in a
we may.
democracy. I'm just gonna always push that number so that we're not just looking at how much money we can, get from everyone, that we're being really thoughtful. And I'm not saying you're not, Rob, but you know, throwing things out like, well, let's do it from every sale in 100% of it rather than the other way. I'd love to see all of that, and I still like to know which towns are doing it.
So I know, Stephanie, you had a list that you had circulated to everybody. I apologize. I'm on my work computer right now, so I don't have that handy. Is that something you could pull up, Steph?
Yeah. So I sent that out probably in October, a list
Right.
of, at
Yeah.
that time, who had it. And then also just a quick clarifying point, and I can absolutely pull that up. The municipality can decide whether the buyer, the seller, or both parties responsible for paying the fee. That's all part of how the legislature would be written if this were, to be a local option.
And to my point, Rob, and I think I prefaced this, I know we have some of this information, but there are people who are just, attending the meeting.
Yeah.
And so not everybody may get all this information. So if I'm asking something that's been answered before, that's why. I also want to let you
course.
know, Paul Tuccieri can't speak on this meeting. He's having Zoom issues, so he's listening. So if you have questions to him, you might want to text him.
Okay. Paul, if there's
Hey.
anything.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Hey, we can hear you now.
We
All
can
right,
hear you,
good.
Paul.
I'm
I got your
sorry.
back, Paul.
All right, Paul, I love you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your help here on this one, but thank you. I'm back. The problem between the keyboard and the chair, I'd like to
That's
say.
right. Yeah.
I'm sorry to take over the screen, but I just quickly pulled up. I'll just keep it up for a minute. But these are the list of towns that through my research I could find, have this already.
Right. And important, thank you for also noting which ones have split tax rates as well.
Yes.
Yep, helpful.
Sorry,
So-
can you make that a little bit bigger?
Sorry,
Thank you.
sorry, everyone. I can also read it if that's helpful. So it's Amherst, Arlington, Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, Chatham, Chilmark, which I don't even know what that is.
Martha's
Concord.
Vineyard.
Thank you. Concord, Edgartown, Falmouth, Nantucket, Oak Bluffs, Provincetown, Somerville, Tisbury, Truro, Wellfleet, and West Tisbury. So
Yeah, 6
and-
of those are Martha's Vineyard. So
Yeah, I mean, and I think it was Julie who highlighted that as a part of her question when we first started talking about this, oh, it seems like it's resort towns or summer towns or, second home towns, that type of thing where they do this. And there are some of those for sure. And there are others that are larger municipalities. And so part of what we're doing here is figuring out what would be the right approach for Westwood. And I think at one point, Paula, when, I think you raised this very issue, God, maybe it's that same October meeting. We talked about, hey, if we were to put together a recommendation, that recommendation could even include, is there some type of, threshold or first-time buyer credit or something like that or exemption that could be in place. I also see, Ellen, you have your hand up. You're on mute, Ellen.
Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I'm struggling a little bit because the mute button was not working. Thank you. I remember when we first started talking about this, there was a kind of almost a tangential comment that most of the towns that do this seem to use the revenue they collect to fund affordable housing. And I'm just wondering if we have any more data on that, because I know we're talking more about using it for capital projects, that kind of thing. So I'm curious what the breakdown there is. It may be too early in the discussion for that, but as we move forward, I'd kind of be interested in that data. Because as Paula said, I like to see what other folks are doing, because if we're going to be an outlier, it just is helpful to understand that in the use, not necessarily in implementing this. But do we have any sense of what some of those communities that have done this really are allocating those funds to?
Laura, I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I believe there was one of the committee members that was actually their charge, was to see of the towns that had implemented it, what, if anything, the revenue raised was earmarked for. So
I can just add to one data point. Nantucket does open space acquisition with
Yeah.
their-
Oh, okay, cool.
So it can be a variety of things. That's why I mentioned that one.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Like benchmarks are good.
And if I recall, Chris, if I recall, when we looked at this and we started talking about it, some of what people were adopting was almost in addition to the Community Preservation Act, the CPA.
Yes, most of the communities, and Stephanie may have more information, but most of the communities that have something, what we're talking about, also have adopted the CPA. So
And
it's in
so,
addition
yes.
to the housing efforts that they're trying to do.
And so to be clear, the CPA requires those funds be used for open space, affordable housing, was it recreation, and there was a fourth.
Historic preservation.
Historic,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yep, that's right. So, so Ellen, yes, I think that, you know, we can sort of break that down in terms of which ones are using the funds and how they're earmarked to be used. So we'll do that at a future meeting. May I see
Thank
you?
you.
Have
Yeah, I was just wondering if, Stephanie, if you could update that list, but add a column for county, I think that would be helpful. And also maybe whether or not the municipality has opted into the CPA. And then if you could recirculate that, I think that just gives us a broader picture. I think county would be helpful because a lot of those are in Barnstable County. But I just don't know where the rest of them are. And I'm not sure if any of them are in Norfolk County. So if you wouldn't mind doing.
County, that nothing has updated that I know of since then. Especially because that was only in October, November, I sent that out. And, since then, the governor was trying to make this as just an easy local option for communities to adopt. That didn't pass. So any other community doing this would have to go through the legislature of a home rule petition, which takes like a year plus. So I'm going to confidently say that I won't be updating much on that list. But I can add the county for sure
That-
and recirculate.
That would be great. Thank you.
Nancy, had to see you have your hand up next.
Yeah, Stephanie had noted that the spreadsheet that I was working from also had the amount of the sale price in excess of $1 million when doing the calculation, not any amount of $1 million and less, if I'm
Yeah.
making sense. So I just did a quick analysis, and if I said at 0.5%, it would have raised $6 million over that 10+ year period. The difference is with only the value over $1 million, it would have raised $2 million. So 6 million down to 2 million,
Thank you.
just to give you that data.
Sorry to jump right into Mayor one more time. The CPA communities on that spreadsheet I sent out have a check next to them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Melissa McDonough, I see you have your hand.
Well, just related to that, what is the status of us considering the CPA? So would this be on top of the CPA potentially?
So this group talked about that about a year ago, and we did not push that forward as a recommendation to the select board at that time. So it's that we don't have the CPA in place currently. So for us, I think we're considering this, separate and apart from the uses that are typical for the CPA, but we haven't put anything together yet for what our final recommendation is. I think, we're looking at it as, as I said earlier, many towns are faced with some of this very, very same challenges of aging infrastructure, 2.5, going not far enough to sustain operating budgets given increases in fixed costs that they're experiencing, similar to what we're experiencing. So this is, we may be a bit of a trailblazer here in terms of challenging some of this, but it's in my mind, it's an exercise that would be helpful to understand, can we get something like this through, and what would it enable us to do to address some of that aging infrastructure that we have, so that we have people that are buying into the community as in the long run, as opposed to continuously having to pass debt exemption overrides for new reconstruction.
So I know that we don't currently in Westwood have the CPA. I know that we didn't push it forward because we were looking at a lot for Hale and realized it wouldn't be in time to do anything with Hale. I do wonder if it's something we should reconsider generally, because when we look at that list of communities that have this transfer tax versus those that have CPA, it seems that communities that are more similar to Westwood have the CPA. rather than transfer tax. So I just think it's something we should not necessarily keep off the table.
That would be, so just so that we're clear, and Stephanie, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but that would be then sort of a double dip, right? Because the CPA itself adds a percentage to the tax levy, if I'm recalling correctly. And then if we did this transfer fee, that would be a second source. And if we did the transfer fee and had the CPA, I believe the requirement would be those funds would have to be used for those same purposes. And I don't know if I have that all clear in my memory, but that's what I recollect. Nancy, I see you have your hand up. No? Okay. Stephanie, Chris, am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, yes, there are certain requirements under CPA. So there is a surcharge that the community would have to vote. And that surcharge would then be collected as part of the real estate taxes. And it will go into a separate account. The town would have to establish a CPA committee. That committee would have to present its recommendations to town meeting each year as far as which projects would be supported with CPA funds. Also, I believe we'd also go to an election as well to vote this in.
And
That was, I think you had said that we couldn't do a special election, that most of the time when CPA was adopted, it was the annual town. Chris, I think there was some statistic you provided us even
The
on
presidential election.
That's
Yes,
that's
the
what it
presidential
was.
election was
Yeah.
the one that the agency, the organization that helps communities with CPA recommended moving forward with this.
But isn't the difference with CPA that doesn't the state match some of the CPA funds?
It's not a match, Paula, but there is a contribution from the state. And
Okay.
the contribution is not a fixed amount, so it varies depending on what happens at the state level and it's through the
But I mean, I think that's the attractive thing for
Yeah.
people, is to say that it's not just you paying, we're actually getting state money as well. So I think that's sort of a.
and just to be clear, all the residential transactions, are not all, but a majority of the residential transactions that are happening in Westwood, other communities that have adopted CPA are reaping the benefits of those turnovers or those changes in.
I'm
financing.
sorry, repeat that again?
Because Westwood's not part of the CPA program, what happens is when homes it's part of the registry of deeds, it's a fee. So those fees are collected. And then those are dispersed amongst the communities that have adopted it. So the times that Westwood has turnover or sales of property that are eligible for this, there's a fee that's attached to it that then is distributed amongst the communities that have adopted CPA.
I have a little
Right,
bit,
so we're not getting it.
Paula, if helpful, I have a little bit of data on that. When we looked at this last time, I had reached out to the Registry of Deeds, which is, it gets a little complicated, but the Registry of Deeds is the one that collects fees, I think, for land documents or municipal lien certificates, and then they redistribute it to municipalities to sort of that match you're talking about, which I believe the match when this program first started was 100%. It's now much less. It's down to like 20%. But in 2023, Westwood's portion of that would have been about $93,000.
Okay, great.
Phil, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think that sort of one of the things in looking at these two things together is whether some of the uses would be fungible. In other words, could we take things off the table? Going back to your original example, Rob, can we take things off the table that would ordinarily be part of that 3 million? It's for open space, it's for housing. Is that some of what we're spending and what the incremental is, and we could substitute those dollars for that? Or could we do it in a way that is unrestricted, like the transfer tax, where we wouldn't have to worry about fitting the dollars into a particular slot, is it open space? Is it affordable housing, et cetera?
Right.
So my guess, and I don't know anything about this year's budget, but my guess is that a very small piece of that spoken for or potentially needed 3 million, the call on that 3 million is for things in that area. And therefore,
Yeah, very, very, practically none, right? I mean, when you're talking about the operating budget, you're really talking about the people that deliver the services for the town, right? We don't go necessarily buying open space as a town. Oftentimes, we have the land trust will do that, and we are involved in that as the owners of the property, but they end up as the steward of a conservation restriction, for example. The we don't have, say, public housing, right? So it's not like we buy property for affordable, right? So there's not a lot that it seems like the CPA, it binds you to certain areas where oftentimes that's not how we are allocating funds, to your point, Phil. So I think that's part of why we were looking at this. Is there an unrestricted model that would allow us to be able to, create a source of funds for ongoing major capital investment?
yeah. So I just don't think we should overlap the two discussions. I think they're totally separate. I think, and I have nothing against the CPA. I supported it when I was a selectman, but I think
Yeah, don't want to conflate the two,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
They're meeting different needs.
Yep. Agreed. So, all right. So I know, thank you, Nancy. I think we're going to get an update from, with some additional data. Thank you, Stephanie, for adding the county to that list of communities. That will be helpful. And Paul, you and I can circle back, just, make sure that we've got clarity on what it is you're looking to do and help present to the group so that we can have a more fully informed discussion. And other than that, I think, Chris, we have somewhere in late February, hopefully start to receive the data from, or the report from Doran Whittier on the facility studies, both the school and the municipal side of things. And I think that'll be an interesting conversation for this group as we look at how that evaluation has gone.
Yes, that'll be February, March time is what we're expecting.
Okay, great. Any other topics, questions? Laura?
Rob, do you just want to give a quick update on where things are with the fire station project? Given that that's a capital investment, of kind of a long-term thing?
No, I think I'm going to defer that to, we're going to have a long presentation on that tonight at the FinCom. So I would hope that you guys you'll see an update that Molly gave on the select board meeting that I mentioned earlier, or the FinCom meeting tonight. I'm mindful of folks' time. The reality is we've gone through, a lot of the process. We have the Zoning Board of Appeals has granted the necessary variances, and we have an estimate as to, what that might look like to the average home, which you'll hear tonight at the FinCom meeting. So I don't want to get out in front of that.
That was kind of the update I was thinking you should
Yeah, and
provide.
so that
just
may
what
be
you're
why
saying now.
that may be why you want to watch tonight's meeting. So that's what I've got with respect to the fire station update.
And we continue to work on moving it forward to town meeting.
Correct. Yes. Laura, I see you have your hand up.
Can we do a quick minutes vote?
We absolutely can do a quick minutes vote. You circulated the minutes from
So we have 2 sets of minutes, and I'm hoping next time we'll be down to just 1 set of minutes for once, which will be good. So the first set of minutes was from October 8th, and everybody was at that meeting, so it's a very simple vote. So if someone wants to make a motion for approval of the October 8th minutes.
I'll move.
Second.
Great, hold on. Melissa. Second. Okay, we'll do a roll call. Ellen,
Aye.
Maya,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Nancy Hyde,
Aye.
Nancy James,
Aye.
Paul. To Sherry.
Aye.
Okay, Paula,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rob.
Aye.
Great. Okay, and then the second set is from November 19th. That one, Ellen wasn't at that meeting and Paul, so I'll just have you guys not do this vote. So can we have a motion to approve those?
So
So-
moved. Second.
And a second?
Second.
And, okay. And let's do this roll call vote again. Julie's not here. Maya,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Nancy Hyde,
Aye.
Nancy James.
Aye.
We're skipping Paula,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Aye.
great. And our next meeting is,
I'm sorry, quick procedural question.
Yeah.
Since Paul and I are present today, do we have to abstain and not just be skipped? Maybe that's a question for Pat.
yeah, that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Paul
Abstain.
and Ellen.
Abstain.
Abstaining is the proper way to go.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. And then one other thing, and Maya or Tim, I don't know if, or Lemma, I don't know if you guys want to just mention as the list of the meetings that are upcoming where budget-related items are being discussed. I believe you guys have a meeting Thursday, is that right?
Thursday, yep. Thursday, Tim and Lemma will be presenting the budget to the school committee.
Awesome.
So another exciting meeting everyone should tune into.
And if you can't tune in live, Westwood Media Center has it on YouTube and you can scrub through
Exactly.
it quickly and get to the pertinent stuff the next morning over coffee.
Exactly.
All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn and return everybody 16 minutes early.
So moved.
Second.
I'll do a
Or
roll
you
call.
want to just call the roll?
Yep, Ellen,
Aye.
Maya,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Nancy Hyde,
Aye.
Nancy James,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Paula,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rob.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and see several of you this evening.
Thank you.